much, Professor. Dear Professor, dear colleagues, it is my honor and utmost pleasure to be here at the University of Miskolc. As it has been mentioned, I'm a research fellow, which means that unlike many participants of the project and the conference, I'm not a legal expert, but I'm a policy analyst in the field of defense, which might also mean that my presentation might be a bit more down to the ground and very practical in terms, but you will see. So what I'm going to talk about is a brief introduction of how Hungarian defense industry has been developed in the past, let's say, decade. And I offer this as a case study that is quite unique in Europe for various reasons. First of all, because the Hungarian defense industry, when it started to be kind of rebuilt and redeveloped around 2016, started out of scratch. So a very basic foundation that was the remnants of the Hungarian defense industry after more than 2 decades of downsizing. It meant about 2,000 employees altogether in the defense sector, having some kind of profile in production, research and development in the security and defense field, compared to an estimated number of 315,000 employees across Europe. So this is a very small segment. We only had about 30 to 40 companies who had either dual use or security and defense related products, and these were mostly small and middle enterprises. So we didn't have any meaningful major companies. And there was no real supply chain behind. These companies were only used to provide some logistics, operation and maintenance for the Hungarian Defense Forces equipment. This also meant that there was no tie-in to major European arms production networks or research and development networks. And the companies themselves carried out only very limited research and development because we didn't have too much to research. And it obviously also meant that there was not much arms exports to the international market because we didn't have any modern products to put to the market. So when we speak about Hungarian defense industry, it is a story of reconstituting some capacities lost and developing some new capacities in the past close to a decade. And this was a complementary program of the comprehensive armed forces development program that has been running in Hungary since 2016, 2017. Originally, it was dubbed as the Zrínyi program. Now this name has already been dropped. It is the comprehensive armed forces development program. And I will offer you an overview and some of the main pillars of this modernization, the goals and how these are realized. So first of all, the primary goal was to establish Hungarian defense industrial capacities that support the modernization of the armed forces. I tried to give you a couple of practical examples, and one of the best examples in a general sense is the production of the Lynx infantry fighting vehicle, because these vehicles are procured by the Hungarian Defense Forces as well. They are co-produced by Rheinmetall in the framework of Rheinmetall Hungary and Hungarian employees in a Hungarian factory in Zalaegerszeg. So this is something directly connected to the Armed Forces Modernization Program. It also means that the government was successful in integrating production and procurement, and also adding within this joint venture of Rheinmetall Hungary an element of research, development, and innovation for the future years. This is underpinned by the example of the Rheinmetall factory in Zalaegerszeg and the Zala zone test facilities that are functioning very close to this production site. This also meant that once the facility itself was built up and the production started, actually the first Lynx IVF rolled out of the factory in last December. So, of course, the Ministry of Defense and the defense sector itself was looking for those SMEs who would be able to participate in the supply chain. And actually, they are still looking for more and more such companies because they want to extend the supply chain, make it more redundant, and offer opportunities for more Hungarian companies to participate. And as I mentioned, they also try to add and are working on adding more research elements of this defense ecosystem, which means contacting academia, various research and development facilities, laboratories, small startups, and so on. And the overall goal is to integrate new technologies. Given our example, the Lynx infantry fighting vehicle, this means that those who are working on active defense technologies for fighting vehicles, on anti-drone technology, sensors and lasers in Hungary, for example, such facilities are working in Szeged and in Budapest as well, are very tightly joined to this production site and the development program. You can see on a map what are the main sites of Hungarian armed forces development, defense technology development and defense industry development. You can see Rheinmetall in Kaposvár and Zalaegerszeg. Since then, there have been some other elements added, like the Rába company has been joining the production of the so-called Gidrán infantry fighting vehicle, and Győr became involved. The explosives development plant in Várpalota has been being built, and the helicopter parts company in Gyula is already in operation. As you can see, Rheinmetall's name appears a couple of times because the German and Hungarian defense industrial cooperation has been deepened to strategic importance, and Rheinmetall, for example, through Rheinmetall Canada, developed one more branch in Hirtelek that is producing some parts of radars. And the goal with this extensive network development was to tie in to so-called Tier 1 European defense industrial networks, which are the most advanced and largest defense industrial actors in Europe. And on the one hand, through these steps, the Hungarian defense industry wanted to bring in world-class firms to Hungary, and through this save the market entry costs, and also get access to the most advanced know-how in the field of technology. And both Rheinmetall and the Airbus company could provide this added input. There were also some elements that did not bring companies to Hungary, but through acquisitions abroad, brought defense technology to Hungary through the procurement in the Czech Republic of Aero Vodahody, an airplane company, or Hirtenberger, a mortar company. And these are now substantial parts of the Hungarian defense industrial spectrum. If you want to have a snapshot of how this ecosystem has been developed, you can have an overview here. Of course, maybe it's not surprising, let's say, strategic level coordination is under the Minister of Defense, and on the left side you can see kind of the military input. The Hungarian Defense Forces, through the Chief of Defense, provide and identify the needs, which means the strategy, the plans, the policy side from the military, and they can define what are these operational projects that need to be supported by defense industry. In the middle, you can see the innovative part, which means that there is a ministerial commissioner for defense innovation within the Ministry of Defense. There is a department for defense innovation and capability development. And a couple of years ago, a new Defense Innovation Research Institute has been established. This might not be very surprising, but in Hungary it did not exist for decades now. As I mentioned, we've been developing from scratch. And these strategic directions or focus areas that have been identified through the innovation branch of the Ministry of Defense are then channeled to the ecosystem. And on the right, you can see the external and internal actors or pillars of this defense industrial ecosystem. Like, as I mentioned, research institutes, national laboratories, actors of academia, members of defense industry, startups, SMEs, and so on. And then there is an obvious question, how is it going to fly? I mean, we have very nice institutions, we have nice plans, but okay, how do we fund this? And funding is one of the key aspects also at the European level when we speak about defense industry. Here you can see the long-term defense spending trends starting from 2014 up until today, and with a forecast to 2030. The data are based on the budget acts of the Hungarian government, and from 2025 to 2030, this is an MOD forecast. And what is important to point out is that we are currently in 2024. The increase has been substantial. And since 2022, this increase is not only the procurement costs of the equipment, but also some part goes to the defense industrial production and capacities, extending these capacities, and also the life cycle costs of all those equipment that we have procured or that we produce. So the sustained increase in defense spending is a must in order to keep the process going. And maybe I will be brief, but I will leave some room for questions. Instead of conclusions, I offer some goals that were identified by the government to be reached by 2030. I offer these because, I mean, it's very early to draw any kind of conclusions, as we have been discussing briefly in the lunch break with Professor Szilágyi. We've been doing this, I mean, developing Hungarian defense industry in a meaningful way for 6 to 8 years. And for such projects, this is a long-term marathon, which means that by 2030, we might gain the first meaningful results. But until then, it's hard to draw early conclusions. The goals that the sector wants to reach is to extend from the previous 2,000 employees to 5,000 to 8,000, which is a very significant leap, especially when we speak about skilled workers, many in the technological field, who are also warmly welcomed by other sectors. They want to reach an export or output of 1.25 billion euro, which is, if we compare to other European arm exporters, is not a big sum. But if we compare to the Hungarian baseline, then this is very extensive increase compared to the 2019 data of 900 million euro dual-use export value. And we will see whether this is indeed possible for the defense industry itself. And by 2030, it would be the goal to having covered the national requirement or national demand for most of these equipment pieces that are produced by Hungarian defense industry. For example, the current plan is to have 209 Lynx infantry fighting vehicles procured by the defense forces, out of which 163 should be produced in Hungary. And this should be finished by around 2028, by which time the Hungarian defense forces already offered one heavy brigade to NATO. So that's kind of a strict deadline. After that, the Lynx factory might have the capacity to produce for export. And until then, it's not a meaningful question. Why don't we have export profit from producing Lynx? Of course, this also would mean that at least in these sectors, fighting vehicles, radar technology, sensors, so these very few and narrow defined sectors, there should be some kind of functioning defense industrial ecosystem established, starting from SMEs until the larger companies, and to tie in to tier 1 companies at the European level. By 2030, we should have at least the first markets and actors identified in the arms sales market, the first orders for the products that the Hungarian defense industry is going to be able to produce, because otherwise we won't have any arms exports. And the tool, let's call it a tool of bringing in Rheinmetall, bringing in European tier 1 companies who represent top level and represent a well-known brand is maybe the most important tool that the government is using to break in to those defense markets, international defense markets, that usually don't really welcome small players who don't have an extensive background and track record of inventing and producing new arms technology. So in the next 5 to 6 years, there is still a lot to do, and I'm very curious if you have any questions regarding these issues. Thank you very much for your attention.